So first of all, I'll just explain really quickly a little bit about me. Tim already introduced me, but I'm a co-founder of Beyond Ag. And what we're doing is we're reshaping the global food system, and we use food waste and we transform it into food and fertilizer with insects. I actually thought we'd get the most out of tonight and the introductions if I handed over to the three founders that we'll be hearing from to share a little bit about themselves quickly and also share a little bit about their startups. So to start off, I'll first hand over to Mike, if you're happy to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name's Mike Halligan, and I am one of the two founders of Scratch. And we basically make Australia's best dog food, and it's direct on subscription, shipped to your door. So we're not something you'll ever find in a retail store. We're only direct to the customer. In a world where pre-COVID, about 5, 6, 7%, if we were lucky, of people bought dog food online. It's quickly changing. So we've been impacted, particularly in supply chain. But all in all, pretty lucky in the scheme of things so far.
Thanks, Mike. And I'd love to introduce Zoe as well, if you're able to jump on from Looplearn.
Yeah, thanks, Phoebe. And hi, everyone. So my name's Zoe. I'm co-founder of Looplearn, and we went through the MAP program in 2018, so 2 years ago now. And Looplearn provides solutions to automate the identification and attendance processes for organisations that have a duty of care requirement around providing supervision for other people. So our primary market to date has been schools, where there is a really strict duty of care compliance around knowing exactly who is on a campus at any time. So things from making sure that attendance is taken properly from students, as well as visitors and contractors that are coming on site, and make sure they've got all the right kind of requirements in place, and authorizations and declarations and all of that kind of stuff. And COVID's hit us pretty hard because schools shut down for a couple of months. So we're talking a bit about that today.
Thanks so much, Zoe. And we've also got Adam here from Health.
Thanks, Phoebe. Hi, everyone. It's good to be here. As Phoebe mentioned, my name's Adam Janke. I'm one of the co-founders of Health. Now, Health, it didn't start out with ambitions to become a business. It started out addressing a personal need that me and my family had. In particular, in 2016, my grandpa, who was still living at home alone and had been independently for 4 years since my grandma passed away, he had his first major fall at home. We were fortunate in the sense that the fall happened outside when he was putting the bins out. Lives on quite a main road. People were driving past, saw him, got him the help that he needed. He got him to hospital, and doubly fortunate because there were no major breaks. But even so, he had to enter some period of pretty significant rehabilitation because he was having balance issues. And then when he concluded that, he wanted to stay living independently in his own home. And that's what we wanted to support him to do. It's the place that he was comfortable in. It's the place that he'd been in for more than 60 years. It's what he wanted. It's what we wanted. We stepped up the level of care that we were providing to him, but we were visiting him before work and after work. But unfortunately, because we couldn't be there during the day, we missed some key indicators that his health was declining. And he fell again and went into hospital again. And when he came out, he was frailer still. My background's at the intersection of public health and technology. So prior to I worked at Ericsson, and prior to that at Cochlear, the bionic ear manufacturer. I'm actually just finishing off my Masters of Public Health at Melbourne Uni right now. So this is my last subject, my last semester. It's taken me 7 years to do a 2-year degree, but that's where I sit. And so it was natural for me to look to technology solutions that could support him. I found that he had the industry standard in falls detection, the pendant that's worn around the neck. But the problem with that, as we saw it, is that you only get an indication that something's gone wrong after it happens. And the kicker was that on both of those occasions when my grandpa fell, he wasn't wearing his pendant anyway. So we set out to build a smart home system that would really work for my grandpa. And it was really just ideating and prototyping a system that would work for him. We settled on something that was really non-intrusive, really easy for him to understand, gave us some insight into his health and well-being, and how it was declining in advance of an incident occurring, and also didn't require him to change the way that he lived his life. We all call my grandpa Umps, and so that's where the name Umps Health comes from. And because you're all at a computer, if you want to check out the technology, you can just visit our website. And Phoebe, would you like me to just jump straight into the pre and post COVID stuff?
Yeah, Adam, that would be awesome. Let's stick with that. And I'd also particularly, when you go through and talk about how what's changed from before COVID to and what's happening now, I think it would be really interesting for everyone to hear about how you've been able to step up your support for your current customers as well as new customers, and what you were doing before COVID in particular that allowed you to step up and make the most of that.
Yeah, so prior to COVID-19, I guess to give you a sense of where our business was at, we had a product that was in market. We had, the business had been going for about 3 years, but the bulk of that was really on the design and development of our technology. It was in 2019 that we really launched our smart home system to the aged care sector. We'd built some partnerships with significant aged care providers. They were starting to make referrals to clients. We'd been awarded funding under a federal government tender to support a sizable number of people in Victoria. That was in the process of being rolled out. We're operating in an industry in the aged care sector where technology, the implementation of technology was really an uphill battle though. In a sector where technology literacy is quite low, both for the end users, for the family members that are supporting older people, but also for the workforce. And so we were doing a lot of work around education. We were doing a lot of work around government engagement. We were doing a lot of work to try and shift the system that we were operating in. And it was starting to work. We had UMPS being funded under pretty much every funding mechanism within the aged care sector. Yeah, we were providing the technology in pretty much every state around Australia. And then COVID-19 kind of struck, it was pretty clear to me very early on that it was going to have really big ramifications for the aged care sector. We immediately, like as soon as there was community transmission in Sydney, our whole team went remote, because we have day-to-day interaction with older people, with the people that work with older people, and we can't afford to have to quarantine ourselves from those. So we were very early, probably 6 weeks before the social distancing rules came into place. And then we kind of had a decision, and it was something that weighed on our mind. It could kind of go two ways for us. Aged care providers were either going to have to retreat to the core, focus on infection control, focus on the way that they've always done things, in the face of a reduction in face-to-face services, in the face of older people keeping themselves isolated, reducing contact with care workers and family members. Or there was a role for innovation and technology to play in responding to COVID-19 and in supporting the continuity of care. And so it was the Sunday that we were kind of doing this session. It was post a risk matrix that we'd done and identified that risk that things could totally shut down for us. And we decided, no, there is a role for UMPS here. We built UMPS to support the delivery of care, to support better care when people can't always be there. And so we were fortunate to have relationships with large providers already. We scoped up sort of a response package, how we could support them to continue delivering care, and shot out messages that Sunday. And it was very quickly that we got responses from 2 aged care providers that we were working with that said, yeah, this makes sense. Let's do it. And so from there, we started scaling up operations, but not just with a focus on providing insights to family members, also providing continuity of care for care providers. So how can we deliver our insights to the people who are on the front line, to the people who are delivering that care or wanting to continue delivering that care without seeing people? And then we got a couple of projects up and running, and it was really the first time we've had a larger scale implementation within one aged care provider. And I put that down to a fact that COVID-19 in the aged care sector has done three things. It's changed consumer attitudes towards technology. So the attitudes of older people and the attitudes of family members. There's a real willingness to adopt technology-based solutions within aged care now. It just wasn't there before. We were featured on Channel 7 News, I believe it was. And for the first time ever, we had like swathe of older people just buying the system for themselves. So clearly there was that. Usually it's an adult child. Now older people are purchasing them for themselves. Attitudes had changed. The second thing that changed was the will of providers to adopt technology. And you can we think of them as like a channel partner almost. So they went from basically what was the default that technology will not be used and we'll just do it for the people who really want it. And they flipped to the default that technology will be used for everyone and people will have to opt out. And so that will to implement technology was really unlocked in response to COVID-19. And the final thing that changed for us was the funding landscape at a bigger level. So you would have seen rounds and rounds of announcements regarding the aged care sector and emergency funding, and what some of those provisions have done is unlocked block funding that's just been sitting with these providers to implement technology-led responses. And we were fortunate enough to have a direct connection into government and an indirect one through the peak bodies, through the projects that we were already running. So we could play a role in advising the way that technology can be used to respond to COVID-19 and actually shape that policy.
Hey, Adam, thank you so much. I think that's really incredible insight in how you've navigated your way through COVID-19 and been able to help people along the way because of the positioning you had beforehand. And then also that changing attitude is so interesting and something I wouldn't have known beforehand would be an outcome of this changing environment. I'd love to jump over to Mike, and in particular when you're sharing how things have changed for Scratch since we've seen these changes with COVID-19 and the kind of lockdowns and changes to logistics. I'd also love to hear about some of the ways you're making the most of this opportunity with the increased demand for subscription-based pet food and how you've been testing assumptions.
Sure. So Scratch it seems like a really simple business, that we've got 2 dog foods in a world that most brands have, like 15, and they've got all these stores they have to service and all this kind of stuff. But we are a bit more of a vertically integrated brand, so we make our own recipe, we source our own ingredients, we manage warehouse relationships, and then thousands of customers. Each of those are individual relationships where they can jump on live chat, they can speak to us, they've got a history with us. Most of them we've called along the journey. So we've got all these thousands of different stakeholders, really. So our world went from pretty smooth and kind of, focus on growth and being able to, and introducing new products and some development there, to all of a sudden just being really chaotic, because our whole supply chain was impacted, whether it being some of our, our manufacturers or our packaging and those kind of things, couldn't get packaging, packaging from China all of a sudden is a lot slower to come to our shores or more expensive, or the things that previous suppliers would have done for you because they've got the capacity to do so. Some of like the nice touches and service, people just don't have like the room within their company when they're fighting for their futures to deliver on some of the things that maybe they had in the past. So our whole supply chain is impacted, and especially at the point of delivery. Australia Post with such a massive volume of online shopping now, and it's for the last month or two, it's really been kind of in excess of what Christmas is on every single day, pretty much. They haven't had the chance to plan ahead for it, and they've basically fallen over. So we were monitoring kind of when we saw COVID coming, we were monitoring our shipments, and at one point we had 450 odd orders that hadn't been scanned in over a week. And we're just sitting in a warehouse somewhere where customers were wanting their dog food, and then we didn't know where it was because Australia Post weren't scanning, and they were just too, under the pump, just doing their best that they could with everything. So we just sort of like weren't able to deliver the usual service that we wanted, and we went from having one person on customer service to pretty much all hands on deck, answering customers, questions, tracking every single order to see, all right, whose food is going to arrive slower and they don't realize it yet. So, we wanted to give people the heads up if they needed to source another option from the supermarket for the next, just to get them through a few days or whatever it might be. So it was pretty chaotic, and our whole nature of what our team was working on changed sort of overnight, and really took about a month until we ended up switching to a courier, which means we're paying an extra $10 minimum per order, and our unit economics are completely changed, and we're losing a ton of money. But now we've got a operating business, and we're able to fulfill the promise we made to customers, but we're losing a ton of money for it. But on the other hand, we can continue to be a business. We can continue to do the right thing for our customers. The other thing that I think most people wouldn't have kind of realized, and we think, all right, well, online has meant a lot of people have, everyone's buying dog food online now, so that means Scratch must be growing really quickly. People jump into, when they're panic buying especially, they jump into what they've always bought. So we didn't necessarily see any of the upside of people like going online to buy dog food. Yeah, our existing customers brought their orders forward and ordered more spare, but we didn't see a huge influx of brand new people because they were buying the same thing they'd always been buying. So it's only now that we're starting to really actually sort of get some, I guess, additional growth from the move to online, and trying to work out we should be best placed for that. But one of the things we did as soon as we saw it coming was, for better or worse, we'd been in a position where we didn't really have to test too much of our model over the first 18 months. Like, we had a lot of really good natural growth. Customers loved it. They talked about it. Their dogs got healthier, and they tell other people. And Scratch grew really organically without us having to, rely too much on paid marketing and all these different things, or test our model for a year. We learned pretty quickly. And our model is, again, direct and subscription. We make a far better dog food without all the middlemen and everything like that. And all of our messaging is really clear, concise messaging. And it's about the dog and the benefits of the dog. And we never had to discount all those kind of things. And all of a sudden, our income is less secure. People are around their dogs more. They're more passionate about local businesses. They're going online. The market's going online to buy dog food for the first time. So we had to kind of like, it was in, that bit of panic that we all have been through, and some, are still going through, of how does our business hold up? For us, one of the big things was, if you're feeling less secure about your income, is subscription, which our whole business is built on subscription. Is that like too much of a fear? Do people have the capacity to think and consider a whole new dog food right now? Is it just too much effort to think about switching your dog to something else when you're just trying to, keep everything safe? So we were fortunate being a consumer business that we jumped straight onto Facebook and ran ads to get a quick read on the various things that we weren't sure about. So for the first time, we tested promoting Scratch, just one-off boxes, so you didn't have to sign up or anything like that. You can just buy dog food like you could, any other brand in any other business. We tested changing in our messaging. So instead of using like some of the humor or the traditional things that we knew sold really well or communicated Scratch really well, we changed our messaging to compare, right, how does what we usually talk about compare to say messaging about Scratch being 100% Australian made with 97% Australian ingredients and delivered to your door. So we had to, I guess, all of our competitors are jumping online promoting online dog food. We had to sort of adapt our messaging and test what works. And then also we tested the effectiveness of incentives. So we for the first time, we offered free treats for every sign up and just tried to get a read on how that works. So we just tested all these ads against each other and used the statistics that they gave us within a few day window to kind of show us how we might be impacted. And that was just like, that was incredible learning, because we introduced new features into the website. We changed our messaging, but still those changes are still ongoing now. And we basically had the ability to kind of know where to spend our money and how we might be impacted, and if we should cut back on other areas because, you know, we might see a 30% drop, or, you know, those kind of things. So it helped us with a lot of future planning. That was all pretty instant.
Thank you so much, Mike. I mean, that's such a ingenious and lean way to learn and move forward really quickly. I think that's just super incredible for anyone that's in the sort of online e-commerce and subscription space to move in that way. Is really fascinating insight. I'd love to move over and ask Zoe. I think you've got an incredible story to tell. How you've been leading your team through a sudden pivot, and I'd love for you to address that as you talk about what's changed for Looplearn sort of pre-COVID-19 to now.
Yeah, sure thing. So pre-COVID, we were basically in a pretty good position. We closed a funding round in the days before Christmas. So we had our plan laid out for strategic growth over the course of 2020, and then pretty much by the second week of February, we realized we were just going to have to throw that whole plan out the window. So schools, especially the independent schools in Australia, were well ahead of the game in terms of thinking about closures and disease prevention and how they're going to do remote learning, and they started planning weeks in advance. How are they going to still deliver their service, which is education, to students when none of them could come on campus? Now, our products are all about managing people on campus. So in a world where schools are planning for when no one's on campus, we became the lowest of priorities. So all of these, really positive leads and sales we were expecting to get in, especially the March, April, May time, once term kicks off and these strategic decisions start getting made and signed off on, they just halted. So we were in the position where we were like, right, we can't just sit here and twiddle our thumbs. And, it was one of those situations where you couldn't do sales because it's just insensitive. Like when you're embedded in the education system, you know how frantic and how much work and effort is going into delivering these remote learning plans. You can't, start to I still want to buy our product. Just look at you like you're crazy and really ingenuine. So we started thinking about one of our longer term strategies. So even though we were very much focused in the education sector for the last, and the reason that we are is because my co-founder and I come from an edutech background. We're very embedded in the the higher ed and the K-12 kind of edutech space and understanding the problem space there. That's how we originally came up with the idea of Looplearn and solving a pain that was very evident. About 12 months ago, maybe even 18 months ago, we started to realize that what we'd created and the technology that we had did have really powerful applications in other verticals as well. But we very much believed in that strategic approach of being really well embedded in one vertical and getting a lot of traction in one vertical and getting a lot of that network effect. So referrals, you go to these conferences, you become a brand name in that vertical. So we were very much intent on pushing hard in education, even though we knew that we might be able to broaden our total market by going into other sectors. But this year it was all about, let's just embed ourselves in the education sector. So we had to start thinking about, right, so these other verticals that we've always thought that we'd be applicable for, let's have a look at that again and start putting some effort into that, because there's no point, potentially twiddling our thumbs for 6 months. Back in February, we had no idea how long COVID would last for. These were when the predictions around, the cases in Australia going up to 150,000 so it's 150,000 deaths they were predicting back then. It was looking really dire, and we couldn't wait to, see what would happen before we enacted some change. So we just jumped straight into, okay, what is the next most similar use case that we've done high level analysis of over the last 12 months and, had initial conversations with already, and that was the aged care sector. So aged care providers, nursing homes, kind of retirement villages to a kind of a lesser degree, but especially that the aged care service providers in supported living and nursing home sector, they have almost exact same use case as schools. right? You've got staff members that'll come and go, and you'll have a member base that has a requirement for the staff members to have a duty of care over. So that's residents versus students. And then you have your contractors and visitors that are coming and going all the time, where there needs to be an element of knowing exactly who's on the site and managing who's actually there at all times, and making sure that they're doing things like declarations and they've got the right authorizations and authority to be there. So we kind of jumped into that and really focusing around the visitor management piece. This is kind of straight off the bat, aged care providers were shutting their doors. They were just saying, nope, no one's coming in. We're not going to allow any visitors on site. It's too dangerous. But then the flip side of that was that it produces a negative mental health effect for the residents. And how do you manage that over the long term? So we started calling aged care providers maybe like late February. And this is after doing a manic 2 weeks of rebranding, or not rebranding, but minorly changing our brand. We changed our logo to basically just remove the pencil symbol, but then rechanging all of our messaging, redid the website, basically did all-nighters for about 2 weeks in thinking about who are we as a company? How do we want to position ourselves? We're not just edutech anymore. We are broader than that, and spun all of that out onto the website, started calling aged care providers. It was probably 2 or 3 weeks of getting hold of people and then just going, oh, this sounds like a great idea. We love the idea of it, but we're too busy. Like, don't talk to us. And then the tides just turned. It was like in the case, the period of 1 week, suddenly it turned into oh my God, we need to work out how we're going to manage visitors coming on site now. That became the real priority point. And we started doing things like building in functionality, like a thermal imaging sensor, just to be able to do a quick body temperature check of anyone who's signing in to come onto the facility, integrating through to payroll system. So replacing these aged care providers' old staff clock on, clock off systems. A lot of them would have, card scanners or fingerprint scanners just to do staff clock on, clock off, replacing that with our system, as well as all the visitors and contractors that are coming on site, so that everyone's at least getting that preliminary kind of health notifications out from the initial feature got their attention. And then when we could show them how we can manage their visitations and actually comply with brand new government recommendations that are coming out, we can really thank ScoMo for putting this in the news quite a bit over the last 2 weeks, and being quite forceful in his language about saying how he's going to strongly recommends aged care providers to open up to visitors, and they're not allowed to keep their doors shut. And then all of these providers that we were just cold contacting over the previous few weeks started coming back being like, oh my God, we need a solution next week. When can we install this? And it's from a team leadership point of view and managing the team, it turned into almost like preparing everyone for the fact that it might be a slow 6 months, and saying, right, like, we'll get through this. Here's our plan, being transparent, saying it might be tough. There might be the need to, for us to take some salary deductions to get through this wave, to all of a sudden going, oh my God, we need to be like manic busy. We need to make all of these tiny little changes in the software kind of front end usability elements to suit the aged care providers. All of it's completely doable, but it's like, right, they want this next week. Like, let's go team. And then like rallying everyone around, doing these really short timeframes and deliverables. And we're still well and truly in the middle of this. And the whole team coming together and riding these waves, right? Like, it's, everyone is being really mentally drained, and not just in Looplearn because of like the manic kind of craziness or busyness, but things like some of our team members have kids and they're trying to do homeschooling as well. They're not having that separation from work anymore, and everyone's working long hours right now to get this work over the line. And just doing little things like, which I didn't do before COVID, like calling each team member like probably once every couple of days and just asking them how they're going. It's not a work call, it's just like, how are you? We started doing a thing on like Monday mornings that we call the Loop Huddle. And the whole idea of it is just have a half-hour call with the whole team on Zoom, like we're doing now. And everyone just gets to celebrate or rant. And so they can talk about whatever they want. The one rule is like it isn't work related. So they'll celebrate something. Like my one on the weekend was I ran 12K, which is the longest I've ever run in my life. And that was my celebration. And, you know, other people will be ranting about stuff. And it's just a way to have that, I guess, human connection and make sure the whole team is, you know, is aware if other people are finding it tough during isolation and being separated and with the roller coaster of emotions that this brings on. And yeah, that's really where we're up to today. So we're still, you know, fighting tough and working our heinies off to get new product over the line. But at the end of it, we're really fortunate that it's looking like this COVID's going to be opening up a broader market for us. And fingers crossed, we'll be better off in terms of a company because of this than we would have otherwise.
Thank you so much, Zoe. I think it was really interesting to hear how you've touched on like working with your team, not only to lead them through this pivot, but also really looking at how you can support the team as a whole, sort of more personally. I've noticed in our own team, we've become at Beyond Ag so close to each other in this time because we're almost the only people that we're seeing at the moment, as everything else sort of falls away a little bit and during the isolation. I'd actually love to use this opportunity to hear from the founders what they're doing more personally to make sure that founders have the support networks that they need through this time. There's so much change, and as well, part of that is that our usual support networks have changed. So I'd love to throw to Adam, first of all, to hear maybe some of the things that you've been doing or how you're seeking support or supporting other founders during this time.
Well, I'm fortunate in the sense that I work, fortunate and unfortunate in the sense that I share a co-working space now here with my partner. And we've found the connection that we have with each other is really good to be able to fall back on. We don't have a loneliness factor in that sense. We're also, you can probably tell I'm taking this call from my stepkid's bedroom. So we're balancing work at the moment with things like home learning. And we found that also, like, you know, an opportunity for us to connect with one another too, to spend time with my 7-year-old stepson writing narratives, you know, drawing drawings, teaching them science, teaching them paleontology, that sort of stuff. That stuff's been really energizing for me, and so that's how we've been recuperating.
Mike, I know your team was remote before COVID-19 and you're actually in Amsterdam. So what's changed for your team? Oh, sorry, not for your team. We're actually talking more about some of the founder support that's changed over that time.
Yeah. I guess we were fortunate in that, although so much of the world flipped in its head, our usual routine stayed the same, so there wasn't that shock. But still, it's so much to take on, just like the concern for humanity and our friends and our family and everything like that. But I think the biggest thing that we've done that I've had to do is definitely just like go easy on ourselves, because on one hand, it's really easy to say like, okay, we should be, it's a really challenging time and I'm not sure about the business and like, are we going to hit our growth? All these things. And that can lead you to just work like a maniac and just like put everything into work and then just burn out the other side. Or the other way we've said is like, all right, well, yes, make sure we've got a business, make sure we're, sustainable. But if those things good, then let's, go easy on ourselves and realize this is a really tough time. So that's going easy, on expectations of ourselves, of our team. It's kind of refocusing people on valuing their own wellness and their own well-being. And so myself, I've done a lot of little things. Probably the most high impact one has been, if anyone does the morning pages thing, I've started doing that in the last few weeks, and I found that really, really helpful. Of just like you know, you go to bed with so many thoughts running through your head, and you wake up and they're there, but they're even more jumbled. So being able to get them out of my head onto paper first thing in the morning has been really helpful. And just over communicating with my business partner and kind of showing empathy and showing that, like, I don't expect everything to be perfect and running smoothly. And, you know, especially if it's the operations side of the business, operations, even for the most, you had 100 of the most talented people in the world working in operations and scratch right now, it'd still probably have an element of chaos with everything going on. So I don't expect perfection from everyone, nor myself, and making that vocal and just communicating that, just to at least take that kind of, I should be a superhuman in a really trying time, pressure off everyone's back and myself. Because otherwise, like I said, there is so much that you think you should be able to do, or that it's a challenge. You know, entrepreneurs take on challenges, you see opportunities, and want to naturally kind of kick ass. But just being conscious of that's probably not the time. This probably isn't the time to do it if you've got a sustainable business and food on the table.
Thanks so much. I think we've had a really great in-depth look into these stories, and I think it's a really unique opportunity as well to really jump into what's changed for these startups in this time where there's so many unknowns, and how our founders are responding to that, as well as leading their teams through really large changes. It seems like a really good time to jump over to the Slido, and there are some amazing questions that have come through. I can see, Georgie, you've got a question there for Adam. Did you want to ask that and turn on your mic to ask it?
Yep, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing, everybody. Adam and Zoe, Gradle Analytics, our company is also in the residential aged care facility space, doing sort of similar things to Adam, but in a slightly different way. And I'm wondering, Adam, whether there's a friction point with you actually going into those spaces where you've got the high risk sector with the elderly, or are they able to sort of install the hardware that you're using themselves, their families?
Yeah, so I'll answer it directly and then a little bit more broadly, so specifically and broadly. So the answer is our hardware is completely self-install. It could be installed by anyone in 10 minutes. The way that we got to that point was through a really long period of co-designing the technology hand in hand with older people on home care packages. So in the system, putting stuff in their homes, sitting with them side by side and learning how to make things really, really simple and easy. And so that's how we got to this point. And that's been a real advantage when people make decisions around what technology they're going to implement. Well, ours doesn't require internet, can be installed by anyone. And one change that we made is we did add additional over the phone support. And some of our end users really like to chat. So we get some pretty interesting phone calls and text messages.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks, Adam. And Georgie, I also had another question here for Mike that's come through on the Slido, which is, Mike, how are you approaching planning with so much uncertainty on the future right now? And if you have any pointers?
That's a very tricky one. We definitely delayed some things. There are like punts that we took, projects that we kind of believed in but would have a long payoff. We're sort of reevaluating those, or at least being prepared that if we have to, if it's a matter of the business succeeding or not, that we know where the fat is in the business that we can cut straight away. If we just if we keep having to pay all this extra money for shipping and we can't sustain it in the long run, there's no light at the end of the tunnel. We know where the fat is in the business. So definitely knowing what's essential to help you get through the next 6 months, I found really important, and what's kind of like, what would be the nice to haves. Personally, we've because the business has still been able to, like all things considered, we've still been able to continue to grow, and that's been a really fortunate thing for us. So we've sort of looked at it opportunistically in some respects. So we ended up hiring someone during all of this who's just got out of, they were in overseas at the time and just got out of lockdown in the hotel in Brisbane and currently driving back from Brisbane to Melbourne. So we sort of use it as an opportunity to hire talent that would otherwise maybe harder to find or require a higher salary than right at this point. So that's been one thing. And the other thing is like looking at our competitive market and going, all right, well, especially as a consumer business, you know, the challenge is always to be interesting. In the next 6 months, all the interesting, nice to have things are probably the things that most of our competitors are cutting back. So it is in many ways an opportunity for us to stand out further against our market at a time when people are looking to go online, are probably looking to make less decisions and after someone to hold their hand and say, you know, this is the best thing for your dog and these are the reasons why, and just like, but be there if they need, you know, if they're worried or if they want to speak about it and all those kind of things. So we've definitely gone, sort of looked at the upside of all of it. And because we have a sustainable business, because we raised money about 3 minutes before this all went nuts, so we do have some money in the bank. Yeah, we've probably been aggressive in how we're approaching things. So we're still investing in product development, we're still investing in the team, and we're challenging ourselves to still be interesting at a time where it would be really easy to cut back on things that could stand out in a pretty bleak time.
I've got another question here as well for Zoe, and it says, excellent pivot, Zoe. And it's asking, did you need to reevaluate willingness to pay, build new sales approaches, or were you able to redeploy existing knowledge and resources?
Yes, so the sales approach is still quite similar because it is still a B2B approach. So there was an element of understanding the decision makers in aged care and the right people to target, to try to get in touch with. But in terms of the resources and the go-to-market elements that we already had in place, it was really just changing that focus. So instead of scraping contact lists to do with education providers, it turned into aged care providers. What are the keywords? What are the titles that we're looking for? In terms of the outreach, it was a bit of confusion initially because we were, calling the individual facilities instead of like the head offices, and you see the title general manager and you're like, oh, but they're the general manager of an individual facility. The director at the head office that oversees the 5 facilities. That's where we want to get to. But that when you're just focusing on one vertical like that, you get to know it really well. And that's why we like going for specific verticals. So it's the same with education. Once you spend a week in it and just living and breathing it, you understand the ropes of who to approach and how to approach them pretty well. It's very similar with aged care. It's like, we just wanted to sell to aged care. We're not going to get distracted by like all these other businesses, and even things like gyms have been approaching us and how they're going to open up their gyms again and all this kind of stuff. It's like, no, we're going to make some software that's going to suit the nuances very specifically for the aged care sector. And we learn that through having these one-on-one conversations, from being able to reach out to them. And then every conversation that you have, you learn more that you can then apply to the next conversation. You learn more about what the pain point is, what is the big thing that's going to, going to be able to make a difference in the next conversation that I have, or get their interest or solve that real pain. And it goes down to things like staying across industry relevant information like news and things like that as well. Instead of looking at, COVID's this massive issue, how are we going to help solve problems to do with COVID in every industry and every organisation? You start looking at the details of the information to do with that vertical, so that you can really tailor your communications to that industry, so that they understand that you get them, you're focusing on them, you're going to make solutions that's better than anyone else out there that's selling to the construction industry and everything else to do with location management and people coming and going, because we're going to do things to make their lives easier. And that's what we're focused on. And that's really, I think, the main thing. In terms of the infrastructure in place, the sales and marketing infrastructure, that's all you just realign the focus. You can still reuse all of that.
That's incredible focus. Sorry, I've also got a question here, which I think links back to a little bit about what Mike was speaking about when he touched on their opportunity to hire. Heath, did you want to ask that question?
Sure, and I've actually got two questions, and one question is of everyone here. I love seeing all the friendly faces, and I just wonder, to add to the visual experience, if we could see more faces, I think that would be fun. So that's an ask. I know that wasn't open. But yeah, I'm really interested. We hear so much about people losing jobs and so many talented people losing jobs. And it'd be very easy for that not to occur, but I was interested when Mike mentioned that they're actually making new hires and be able to attract really great talent. So I'd be interested across the different teams. I think a few of you have hired new people. You know what? I'd love to know more around the thinking there and the benefit that that's enabled.
I guess, yeah, for us, we actually hired someone really who had a lot of great experience, and we hired them at 2.5 days a week to start with, ramping up to 5 days within the first few months. So, and we probably got them at, I think, a little bit of a discount over what their salary would have probably been deserved in a more economically prosperous kind of time. And look, to be honest, we wouldn't have hired them at full time anyway. So it wasn't an opportunistic, hey, let's use this opportunity to get someone in, whatever. It's someone who had been interested in joining us, and was appreciative of the flexibility. And we said, look, the time is not right. We'd love to chat in a few months, but if you're interested in working with us a few days a week to start with, we can make this work. And let's try. And as soon as the business can support it, because we'd always been super transparent in our hiring process and with our team anyway, and all aspects of the business. So we'll continue. I think we're always looking for good people, and especially if we can identify someone and sort of build a role around amazing people, because it's really hard to find just absolutely incredible people that kind of talent and kind of value fit, especially if you're a small company and not able to compete in some of the many of the other ways that other big companies could. So we're always a little bit opportunistic in trying to find and recognize those people, and especially if you can just be transparent around what works for your business and what doesn't, then that presents opportunities like them saying, hey, yeah, actually this could work in this way. Are you happy to do this?
I'd also be super happy to share a little bit about Beyond Ag's changes in this time. Just really quickly on this one around hiring, is similarly to Mike, we've been extremely fortunate to have someone who we wouldn't normally be able to hire reach out to us, who's sort of done it all before, scaling, working in their case. So we work with a tropical species of fly, but they worked with mosquitoes in Mexico, and they've worked for the World Mosquito Project, scaled a team from 3 to 70, and then scaled that to 16 countries, helping fight dengue fever and Zika virus. And it's just been really incredible. With coronavirus, they came back to Melbourne very suddenly and were looking for work. And I think it's, in some ways, there's that incredible opportunity for startups to find people right now, and especially when it's not necessarily all about the pay. It's about people who want to do really meaningful work, and so that's been something that's been really exciting. I've also noticed a couple of questions in the Slido about team productivity and how the founders keeping employees engaged while everyone's working apart. And so you've gone through this pivot with your team. I'd really love to hear from you some more about what you're doing to keep employees engaged.
Yeah, so we live on Flock, which is a competitor to Slack, the exact same thing. But it's just one of those things where we're all online all the time. There is so much activity kind of going on, and it's, even the software engineers are sharing articles that they find in the news to do with the aged care sector, right? Like, everyone's jumped on board with this. We've got a couple of contractors in other time zones on the other side of the world just to get specialty knowledge to get things done faster, to do with some of the operation system changes that we're making. That was, you know, it's going to be a 3-month-long project that we had scheduled before COVID anyway, but we're just like, holy hell, let's get this done faster now so they can support some of our applications. So communicating with each other generally isn't a problem because we're all on Flock all the time and we do video calls all the time. Making sure that the breaks are there and people are separating themselves from work is something that I've been putting a lot of focus on in the last 2 weeks. You know, one person is sending through something at 3:20 a.m, like an employee based in Sydney, not on the other side of the world, saying here's an update of the work that I did. And then someone else saying, hi everyone, at 7 a.m. the next day, and people responding to it. Like, that's not sustainable. It's great. Everyone's like rallying right now, but we can't do that forever. And we can't have that be the expectation of the whole team. When you're removed, I think, in not having as much kind of face-to-face contact or have routine where you're going somewhere, making sure that this isn't the new expectation of what it is, and feeling bad about that being too much of your life, I guess, being work and not having a break from it isn't good for anyone's mental health. So, and the way that I manage that is literally, I don't reply, to be honest. I'll be up and working at 7:30 a.m. and I see someone do like the, hi everyone, I'm online. I don't reply until 9 a.m, right? Even though I'm there and working, I pretend like I'm not, because I don't want to set the expectation to always be communicating outside of business hours. Like, it's okay to not respond until 9 a.m. So little things like that. But the main one is just doing calls, like those non-business calls that I mentioned before, just those check-ins, like, hey, just want to see how you're going, you know, treat it like the water cooler conversation. And that's the most powerful and the most effective. I was talking to a CEO of a larger company who has kind of 80 employees. He's the one who gave me the idea. He's been doing it with his team, and he's been making an effort to have kind of a 15-minute call with all of his employees across the course of a week, and trying to do that at least once every 1 or 2 weeks, to not talk about work and just check in and say, I just want to know how you're going. And I thought that was a great idea. So I kind of adopted that. It's a lot easier when you've only got 6 full-time employees. So it's a lot more manageable. But the fact that he was doing that, I thought was phenomenal. And it makes a huge difference just to be able to have that, you know, one-on-one check-in to make sure everyone's in a good kind of mental space.
There's another app similar to that called Twist as well. It's like, because I agree, I think Slack's the devil. And Twist is sort of like, it sounds like a similar thing to basically what you've brought in, kind of like with these informal rules within your team. It's like a Slack for people that hate notifications and don't want to be interrupted all the time, but need a central place to talk about things or to discuss particular areas of work. So if anyone's kind of like burning out from Slack notifications, it's a really good thing of being able to control when you're getting notified how often, what your work hours are, and just it's like an app built for doing work in a high trust environment.
Yeah, and trust is a huge thing, right? Like Mike nailed it. We tell all of our team members that we trust them. Like if they need to do something in the middle of the day, especially the ones who have kids working from home, I mean, you've got to trust people to do their work. Otherwise, it breaks down pretty quickly.
So many actionable tips. Thank you so much. And Adam, you were saying your team went remote quite early in all of this. Is there anything in particular you've been doing around productivity and working with your team in this new situation?
For us, I'd say the biggest impact on productivity has probably been the forced implementation of more defined roles and responsibilities. So as just before COVID-19, as we were sort of scaling up the number of referrals we were receiving, our operations, our development, those lines between what people do became really blurred. And we hadn't taken the time to reassess and sort of realign ourselves with the jobs that need to be done. And then what working remotely has forced us to do, and forced me in particular to do, is step back and allow other people to step forward and assume responsibility for their work, which rather than just having everyone sort of doing everything. And so we've definitely experienced a net positive benefit from that side of things, and certainly have no concerns that people are slacking off, not putting work in. Everyone's understands what we're trying to achieve. Everyone's working towards the same goals, on the same page. Yeah.
Thanks, Adam. I've just seen a question in the Slido that's come through, and it's from Eve. Did you want to jump on and ask that question around funding? Okay, I can also ask the question because it's written here. So
that's all right. Yeah.
Oh, great.
I'm there. So I've unmuted. Thank you. Look, it's been a really interesting discussion. I'm in a slightly different situation because I'm at development stage, and I'm developing a tech platform for monitoring conditions of immigration detention. And obviously it has COVID-19 implications all over it. But the key issue that I'm thinking about is what the next 6 months or so looks like in terms of philanthropic, raising funds through philanthropic foundations or through social impact investment and so on. And I just wondered whether anybody has any reflections, because it feels like a pretty daunting prospect. Thanks.
Eve, have you have you done this sort of stuff before? Have you raised any money before, or?
Sorry, am I still there? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So look, I've just received a Myer Innovation Fellowship. So that's my first kind of really solid support. And I have so that's my first stage. And so I guess I've got support for the next 12 months to be able to focus my attention on that. And certainly, I mean, my vision for the project is a global one. And so what that means is I've got the opportunity to look to philanthropic foundations and social impact investment overseas as well as in Australia. So I think that opens up possibilities for me. And my background is in the non-government sector. And so I do have pretty strong networks there. So I guess, but this changes everything, doesn't it? So yeah, interested in your reflections.
So my thoughts are that you're just going about it the right way in development stage, kind of while you're ideating, prototyping, even before you can get to a saleable product, you do need to kind of beg, borrow and steal where you can. And there are all of these grants available, particularly for impact-focused businesses. I'd really suggest you reach out to Abina. Maybe Abina can send you a private message potentially if you haven't spoken to her already. She has a good understanding of that landscape. But if you've found your way to the Myer Innovation Fellowship, then you're halfway there already. Broadly speaking, I think it helps to understand the intention of the funding that you've got. It's for development, so you're not wasting your time approaching larger, more institutional investors. You're approaching grants, aligned sort of philanthropists, and as well as maybe impact angel investors as well. And that way you can save the trouble of having a lot of conversations that won't go anywhere. Where you do speak to institutions, you approach it with an understanding that you're not ready to raise money from them, and it's about relationship building. That's something that we took a long time to kind of understand and learn ourselves.
And I think we have time for just one or two more questions. Zoe, there's a really specific one that's come through for you, which is around cold calls. How do you you do them? How do you identify those initial leads, and what strategies are you using right now to maximize each conversation that you have?
Yeah, so like no one likes cold calling. There's no magic like knack behind it. It's literally like you just do it. You set yourself a target of doing 50 calls a day, and you just learn from it. And people hate doing that, especially Australians. We hate it. We hate forcing ourselves on other people like that. And every single time you have a conversation, you learn more about it. Well, that should be the goal. The goal of the first 50 or 100 calls shouldn't be to make a sale. It should be learning something from it every time. And so with the aged care sector, it would be like cold calling the receptionists and pitching the idea to the receptionist and seeing if we got any reaction from them. And then if they were saying, oh, well, that sounds interesting, it's like, wow, we're onto something here, because receptionist jobs are to be guard dogs, to be honest. They're meant to not let you through to the senior leadership. That's like their job, is to keep the time wasters at bay. And then starting to work out from them who the most appropriate contacts are. So that's from a direct cold calling point of view, was getting what you can from the people right on the front line in terms of the the people at the reception desks facing that every day, understanding who, like if you ask people questions on the fly as well, they're really honest. So you ask them who actually would be the person to be responsible for this, and because they're put on the spot, they're actually probably a bit more honest than if you send them an email or give them time to think about it. So they start telling you the names and the roles of the right people that might kind of manage that area. In terms of like technology or innovation, or like there's some roles to do specifically with disease prevention that I wouldn't have thought of existed, but that of course they exist in the aged care sector. And linking that up with just Google searching, like do your homework before you call as well. Google search the providers, find out how many, find out the scope of, well, for the aged care example specifically, was how many facilities do they have? Do they cater to any specific needs? Can I work that into a conversation to show that I'm not just, doing the same script to every single person? Show that you've actually done some research, looked on LinkedIn, worked out who the right person might be to contact. They might not be the right person, but you throw some names out there and say it with confidence and see if they put you through. And it's, if you are in that phase of saying, look, we just want to do something to help, it's being honest about that as well, and saying, these are the ideas I have, would these actually be helpful? We're in a position to make something new. Do you want to work with this and give us some great ideas that might be implemented? But yeah, I get asked a lot about cold calling, and to be honest, it can be so beneficial because you learn so much in such a short period of time, but it sucks. But just do it. It's like there's no magic around it.
That's amazing, Zoe. I think it's really incredible how far you and your whole team have been able to come in such a short time through incredible cold call strategies and tactics. So really awesome to hear some insight into exactly how you're doing that. I'd now just absolutely love to thank all of the speakers so much for being sharing so openly, and it's been fantastic to be joined by you all. But I'd love to hand over to Heath or Tim now.